Greetings, St. Matthew and friends. My name is Amy Donaldson. I am the Minister of Adult Faith Formation at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Beaverton. And welcome to another edition of my response video to wrap up our study of Session 3 of Max Lucado's Anxious for Nothing. So this week's lesson is titled Present Your Requests to God, and it's based on Philippians 4 verse 6 as we continue through this passage in chapter 4 of Philippians. So for each of these videos, Max starts out with a personal story, an example of a person who's dealing with the different ideas that he's talking about. So this week the story was about Debbie, and she's someone who works for what they describe as a cantankerous old man, but she comes to change her attitude about this. So the main point that Max is making here is that Debbie chose prayer over despair. But I also want to highlight a couple of other things that come out from her story. So another point that Max makes here is that Debbie chose to look for the good and the possibilities in a bad situation, and to ask how God wanted to use her in that place. Instead of focusing on why she didn't want to be there, she focused on what difference she could make and what purpose God had. And I think that's a great perspective for us to take in any bad situation, whether it's a job you don't like, or a difficult relationship or family dynamic, or an obligation that you can't back out of. To ask the question, God, how do you want to use me in this? Or how do you want to use this in my life? But the other key that I want to bring out from Debbie's story is the role of empathy. It was her empathy with this older man that she worked for that changed her perspective and helped her to find a better understanding and a better attitude. We need to try our best to see things from another person's point of view, and when we can't, to ask God to help us see things from another person's point of view. In the long run, we'll find that we have more in common with other people than we have different from them, and that we're all motivated by the same things, by desires and needs and fears in our life. And often when people act out of bitterness or anger, there's a deep hurt or anxiety behind that they're covering up. And what they really need is love and understanding and God's healing. So the topic for this particular video, this session, and what prompts the story of choosing prayer over despair is Philippians 4:6. And this says, do not worry about anything. Well, that's a tall order, right? But that's what the study is ultimately about. So do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Now, one of the things that Max offers in response to this verse is the suggestion that when we pray, we should be specific in our prayers. And he offers 3 reasons for this. And if you missed them, I would invite you to go back and rewatch that video and you can hear that list. But one thing I really like about what he says here is the example of how he prays through each day with God, both at the beginning and the end of the day. So in the morning, he thinks through what his agenda is for the day and he prays through it with God. God, I've got this meeting coming up. Please help me to have the right words to say in the meeting, or give me your guidance as we make this decision. And at the end of the day, he comes back and thanks God for answering those prayers and for seeing him through those tasks or those moments. I think that's a great example for us. So if you don't already have this habit, try it out. In the morning, talk to God about what you have in front of you for that day and ask for God's help and guidance with specific things. In the evening, go back and thank God for all the things that he got you through that day. Now, if you like to journal, you could even write down some of those requests or answers. Now, I can't say that I rigidly follow this pattern every day, but I do try to do it when I remember to. I think it's a great way of reframing my day or my to-do list and putting it in God's hands, while also remembering all the ways that God does help me through each responsibility and each moment. So for me, sometimes the top of my list is prayer that I will sleep well at night, or that I'll wake with my alarms in the morning. And both of those are sometimes challenges for me. So it's even the simple things in our daily routine that we can ask for God to help us with, and then we can thank God when things go well. Or even when they don't go well, they don't go the way we planned, but they work out according to God's plan. So the other main topic that Max emphasizes here from Philippians 4:6 is to pray with thanksgiving or with gratitude. He describes gratitude as a mindful awareness of the benefits of life. Now, this is such an important thing for us in life, even beyond prayer. What are the things in life that we take for granted and the people that we take for granted? And right now is a time when people are becoming even more thankful than ever for grocery store clerks and delivery drivers and other people like that. Before all of this happened, how often did you thank these people? And how often do you thank them now? As a society, we're learning gratitude in new ways right now. But I hope and pray that we can make this more than just temporary, but that we can turn it into a new way of life. I think that's a great goal for all of us. So think about all of the things that we have to be grateful for, and think about how you can thank people, even for the small things they do, and even for the things that they do every day. So Max challenges us with the question, what blessings can you name that God has given you? Now, this may include the people in your life, the things that you have, the abilities you have, the sunshine and blue sky, or even the fact that you woke up this morning to another day and that you have breath in your lungs. What blessings can you name that God has given to you? So Max also talks about keeping a gratitude journal. Now, if you haven't done this before, I would encourage you to try this as well. Now, about 10 years ago, when I was at a really low point and I was living in a housing situation where I was incredibly miserable, I did start to keep a gratitude or thankfulness journal. And every time that I started grumbling about my apartment, I would sit down to write about how I was grateful that I had a place to live. I had heat and air conditioning. I had a job to pay the rent. Now, full disclosure, I will admit that while it did humble me a bit and it did help to maybe diffuse my anger or anxiety a bit, in the long run, it didn't really make me a happier person to keep that journal. But for some people, it does work that way. So I encourage you to try it. But more than just journaling, we should all make it a way of life to recognize our blessings, both small and large, to thank God for them on a regular basis, and to thank other people for all the things that they do that make a difference for us. And finally, I want to mention to you Philippians 4, verses 11 through 13. So this is later in that same chapter. It's later than the main focus of this anxiety for nothing study. But these are also important verses, and I think especially right now they're important. And if part of your anxiety right now is insecurity about money or bills or investments or retirement or employment, I would encourage you to spend some time with these verses and what they mean. Starting in verse 10, Paul is talking about the concern that the Philippians have shown for his material needs, especially while he's under house arrest, as he is in this letter. Because the Philippians are a community that has always been generous in supporting his ministry. So he says, starting in verse 11, I have learned to be content with whatever I have, to know what it is to have little, and to know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This is such a great attitude, and one that some of us may need more of right now. To learn to be content with what we have, with what God provides, whether it is little or plenty. Whether we are well fed or whether we're hungry, to know that God is with us and that God is taking care of us. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Let's make that our motto and our prayer. So in the coming week, spend some time offering specific requests to God and spend some time showing gratitude toward God and toward other people. And most of all, as 1 Peter 5:7 tells us, cast all your anxiety on God, for he cares for you. So join us for next week's lesson, which is the peace of God will guard your heart. Thank you.